Good tidings, Earthlings. It is League Unlocked. That is Mark. My name is Eric. It is an episode of League Unlocked. And these days, not even a day goes by, really, before you don't have playoff action that you have to talk about.
Yeah, but hey, look, playoff action on a Wednesday instead of power rankings, I'll take that one. I love doing power rankings for everybody. I love it because it's fun to talk about what teams moving up and down, all the drama around it. But man, there's nothing like the drama that comes with playoff time. Doesn't matter what region you're in. But hey, we're kicking it off with playoffs on a Wednesday in the LCK.
And I'll tell you what, if it was power rankings, I got a hunch T1 might be moving down a little bit because opening round. And listen, we did a poll on YouTube yesterday before these matches actually started. And it was, when's the playoff run going to end for T1? Because it's set up for the big run all the way back to finals. 8% said they would lose to Afreeca. 38% of you believe they were going to win the back-to-back-to-back-to-back championship. And yes, huge upset here. It really begs the question, why isn't the opening round best of 5? Why do we have best of 3? Your entire season you worked to this point and you're only playing a best of 3? Come on.
Look, there's lots of things that we can talk about with the playoff structure in the LCK, and a lot of people thought that would have changed when Riot took over in the Korean region, but nope, sadly still with the best of 3 in the wild card round, and the best of 3, that's what bites T1 in the behind here because they lose this one to Afreeca Freaks in the way that they play, taking it 2-1.
Yeah, and if we go on a game-by-game basis, you start with the first one, and this is Closer. He started game 1, so did Dread over Spirit, which a little surprising. But Closer comes in for the first game, and early on it looked okay. They were sitting on Soul Point for a very long time. Then there's this dragon fight, but there's no actually dragon to be fighting over. They just have to be fighting by the dragon pit. Afreeca ends up wiping the floor with T1. Keen's Akali was super clean in this game.
Yeah, right out of the gates, game number 1, we were getting the top level performance from Keen. And that was something where you looked at Afreeca Freaks and how they fluctuated throughout, let alone spring, but the summer split specifically. Keen's performance was one of the ones that you would always look at because, Afreeca Freaks are not performing. They're not a top level team if Keen is not being a hard carry for them in that top side. And that's exactly the type of performance that you got out of him today to start out the series on that Akali being a nightmare. And on the side for T1, you had Closer starting in the mid lane, and he had that comfort pick of the Zoe that we've seen not only himself, but a lot of other mid laners dominate on around the world. And this is one that he's looked very good on, just not in this opening match. And that's one where you have to look at it. This is one of the first times that we've really seen a slip up from Closer individually. And that would, this one obviously isn't all on him, the way that things went poorly for T1 around the mid game. But certainly his performance in the mid lane left you wanting a little more. And on a team like T1, and especially with Faker behind you, that's not the level of performance that you can have.
Yeah, and so all the big question marks are avoided because Faker does sub in for that game 2. He gets the Twisted Fate, and his impact is felt immediately. He goes bot, grabs first blood with his first Twisted Fate ulti of the game. Kana looks really good on the Jace. It is a disgusting stomp. 19-3 in kills in favor of T1. 11-0 in turrets. And you're thinking, all right, there we go. Faker's back. That's the T1 we've seen in the second half of the round robin.
Well, that's more or less the T1, the style of play and domination that we saw when they were winning a championship in the spring split. That was the type of stuff, the level of form that we were seeing from them. That was the excitement. Faker comes in, gets put on a champion that he's going to get to be very proactive, very engaging on, have that damage as the TF, be able to roam around. And it was a perfect story for T1 and how they executed in this game. Everybody played really well. And that's the story that we're going to have to be watching as we pivoting from game 1 to game 2 is the increase in almost everybody's performance and in the mid lane with Faker. And then we'll see how that transitions, obviously, for game 3 as Afreeca takes the series.
Yeah, and then that third game, this is where you can complain about the draft if you want. But first off, Spirit comes in for Dread. He gets the Volibear, and The strong suits of T1. Listen, Kana has been insane. You want to see Teddy on carries. Faker's just coming back. Give him a potential carry. But they put all the eggs in the Cuz Karthus basket. Probably the most criticized player throughout, at very least, the summer split. And really, you're used to seeing the Karthus power farm just get so disgustingly ahead that his damage one-shots everybody. It doesn't even matter if he dies because of his passive. But the damage from this Karthus the whole game was really underwhelming because he got so far behind early. And the Kalista pick into it, how many times did we see Keen save Spirit from the Requiem? That was beautiful.
Man, we just had a weekend where we had, Huhi putting on a clinic, flashing all over the place to make sure that the Lux shields were coming through for FBI. I mean, that's then the bot lane. Let's see the action in the top side with the ADC Kalista coming through and making sure to keep the jungler alive. That was some awesome stuff from Keen, but you're pulling your hair out as a T1 fan on the T1 side, watching them get away with some of those ones and the mistakes, the macro mistakes coming through on the side of T1. As you said, yes, the draft, there's a lot that you can talk about, and especially coming from game 2, left a lot to be desired in the deciding match of this series, especially when you consider the skill players, the history of the T1 players. A lot of questions as far as that draft goes, but as far as the execution in game and the players' performances, yeah, absolutely. This one was on the table, could have been taken still with this type of draft by T1, but the pathing and performance by Cuz specifically was very poor, and the rest of the team was not able to rebound from it.
Yeah, not a single turret in that third game for T1. Ends up finishing with a 12k gold lead for Afreeca, and this is the first time in the summer split that Afreeca beats a top 4 team. They waited until playoffs. They were 0-8 against the collective Gen G, Dragon X, T1, and Damwon. And then playoffs roll around and they come away with this series win. You would have loved to have seen a game 4, like I mentioned, with T1 bouncing back. But Faker on set, probably not what you want to see in that deciding game, especially when he's playing against Fly, somebody who obviously you favor Faker heavily. This isn't even the top 3, the triumvirate of mid laners so far in summer. It's against Fly, so sure, you can talk about the draft, but still, they underperformed on the Rift as well.
Right. Obviously, with the draft and with that mid lane set, I think a lot of people will be looking at what other options were available for Faker to be playing, something like the LeBlanc, like the Syndra, these champions that he's known very well and has performed very well on during his career.
And they're at the forefront of the meta, those two also.
You're right. And so to see that passed up here in this situation, this is different to me than when you're looking at a TSM picking set for Bjergsen in certain situations. This to me is even worse, to have Faker put on that type of duty, that type of champion here, and what was available. And set into a matchup against Fly, someone that he has that ability to really put into the ground and really put behind. It's questionable for sure on that matter. But again, the actual execution still could have been there for the team, and it just wasn't enough from T1's side, moving them down to the gauntlet.
And let's give some credit to Afreeca. It's about Keen and Mystic. It has been all split long. That theme continued. They advanced to the next round to match up against Gen G. And with all these changes, well, the upset at least, now T1, they can't even qualify for Worlds off championship points. They're now tied with Gen G, and DRX has 10 more than them. So the only way T1's getting to the World Championship is through the Gauntlet run. And now that begs the question, are you still confident in which 3 teams are going to represent Korea? You still confident? It's just one best of series, but now it's maybe even more difficult for T1 to get through the gauntlet that is the actual gauntlet instead of the summer playoffs.
Yeah, the uncertainty absolutely comes from your top team being Damwon, and the form that they've shown, that's not what you're uncertain about. You're uncertain about them continuing it and the consistency and the young players in Nagari and Showmaker and making sure that level of performance stays through. DRX has had their up and downs. Again, yes, still also having young players. And when you're looking at the T1 side, how things have gone this summer and what you've seen, I think these are legitimate concerns. But absolutely, this is a team that, when you look at T1 and you still look at the path ahead of them in the gauntlet, you only got yourself to blame if you're not able to book your ticket to Worlds.
And if you're assuming T1 can run the gauntlet against, I mean, pretty much anyone. We'll have to see how the championship points end up shaking out between the other squads. We know KT's already locked in as the first boss of the gauntlet, which is hilarious. They have 10 points. No one else outside of the current playoff teams got any points in all of 2020. But now you're looking at championship points, and DRX or Gen G should be favorites for that number 2 seed, unless Damwon does end up, because let's face it, they should be huge favorites, especially with T1 out now against Gen G or DRX in the finals. Damwon should be big favorites. So I got Damwon winning as that number 1 seed. Then you have DRX or Gen G, depending on who wins, as that 2nd seed. So really, T1, the big question is, can they beat? It's either probably going to be DRX or Gen G when the gauntlet rolls around.
Yeah, and the idea here should be, I think at this point before the gauntlet, need to be a little bit more clear with your roster moving forward as far as what it's going to be. Solidify that a little bit, because I think you had a lot of people making questions, let alone about the closer and faker situation. You had people making the questions about, well, are you pairing up closer with Cuz and having, alongside faker is the idea. Like something there before you get into this gauntlet, which you've got a short amount of time, obviously, as this playoffs will wrap up in the LCK in just a matter of a week here. That is going to be the big test and big question for me moving into the gauntlet for T1, is what type of changes and adaptations and learning we see from this loss to Afreeca Freaks. Because yes, there's a lot to clean up and there's some ugly things, but there certainly still is a lot of positives and signs of what this T1 strength should be.
Yeah, and the big question, Elam's a guy we haven't even really talked about in a long time, because Cuz has been getting pretty much every single start. Maybe his performance in this series makes you rethink that when the gauntlet does end up rolling around for T1. There's also, before the weekend even hits, we've got the finals of the LPL. They didn't want to wait until the weekend to have Top eSports and JDG get the rematch from spring. Mark, this is obviously super exciting, kind of the matchup everyone was probably hoping for as soon as you saw IG and FPX slump their way out of playoffs. These are the big 2 top dogs, have been for the majority of the summer split. Top eSports have been talked about as the best team in the world for the majority of summer. They're looking for their revenge against JDG. It was an epic 5-game series last time. Which way are you leaning in the LPL finals?
Oh man, I want it to be another 5-game series, go the full distance. When you're asking me to pick between Top eSports and JDG, I was just trying to think to myself, like, how do I pick? Which side do you really want to go on? And it was so close that I couldn't find a legitimate reason to really pick one or the other. I had to go with something stupid. And I saw that Navi said, man, you put flash on the D key, you'll be faster on getting your flashes. And I say, no, man, it's F for flash. Come on. It's going to be Top eSports. That's the way it's got to go. I'm sorry, my man. You're picking D for flash? You can't win the championship this time.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, the storyline really is painted for Top eSports. They've already clinched Worlds. Both of these squads have. Obviously, getting the top seed versus the 2nd seed does have some implication when it comes to seeding. But the problem is now there's 4 LPL teams, so they're going in every group. I mean, it doesn't matter, assuming the 4th seed can get through play-ins, which, okay, pretty confident in any LPL team getting out of play-ins. So there's going to be a Chinese team in every single group. And for TES, I mean, if they play to the level that they did against Suning, which is more akin to what we saw at their peak in the summer split, I feel like the matchups, I mean, Knight versus Yagao is probably the biggest mismatch in this series, and that's the one that's going to be looked to exploit. Can Carson keep up with Kanavi? Maybe not, but does he really have to? I'm not sure he does.
Yeah, I think that's the important one, is does he really have to? Because I think that mid lane matchup, the first one you talked about between Yagao and Knight, that is absolutely going to be where the money is made in this series. And this is one where you look back, you look at how they played in the past, and you look at all these other series, and when JDG came up on top, that was the big question. That was the big ask from them. Is Yagao going to be able to step up in the mid lane and be able to handle Knight? Because as Yagao is known in the LPL as someone that gets through the laning phase and then is able to team fight really strongly. The problem with Knight and how good he is, you're not really getting through that laning phase a lot of times, and you're not getting through it in okay shape a lot of times.
Yeah, you might be down 30 CS. No problem.
Right. So that is going to be the question, and that is the ask for Yagao. And you know what? He answered the bell last time, and he was there and delivered a great performance for JDG to get their championship in spring. Can he do it again in summer? And can he do it now in summer? That not only is Knight really in full form, but the rest of top esports, and of course the addition of Jackie Love, is in full form.
Yeah, and the fact that Karsa and 369 stepped up in the Suning matchup really has me even more confident in top heading into this series. I don't see it being a 3-0 either way. Maybe 3-1, a competitive 3-1. I'm fully expecting a 5-game set here with top esports getting a little bit of revenge. But either way, these are two of the 3 best teams in the world right now. That's it.
Okay. We've been preaching to watch the LPL and watch the top level teams there all year long. Ain't gonna stop now for this finals, and I'm telling you, I'm promising you, with this level of finals and top esports and JPG coming across, you better believe I promise at least one of these games, you're gonna get a wacky, wild, unpredictable champion pick come through, and it is gonna be busted and win the game for that team. I promise you, that's just the way this thing usually goes. There's always something that exciting and worth watching, even if you don't care about these teams.
And I fully expect it to be Kanavi or Knight. If someone's picking out something zany, or 369, we know he loves to pull out the Jax or the Kale or some kind of carry in the top lane. But it will be a banger on the Rift for the LPL Finals. The actual weekend has, talking about bangers, you might have one of the most exciting Saturday matchups that we've ever had with G2 versus Fnatic, TSM versus Cloud9, the 2 greatest rivalries in the history of North America and European League of Legends on the same day, which is amazing. But before that even starts on the weekend, we got to figure out who's getting that final spot at Worlds in the LEC. Schalke versus Mad Lions. Maybe even a more hype matchup. Well, it's not more hype, but it has more on the line than at least G2 and Fnatic. Who's getting the final spot out of Europe, Mark?
Hey, you come to me 3 weeks ago, I'd be looking at this one, I'd be saying, man, like, how can you not say that you want the Mad Lions to be the team that's representing? And after these past 3 weeks, how can you look at the situation and go, I'm against Schalke? How could you ever be against the Schalke train and how it's gone right now? God, Gilius, man. This is going to be close. I expect that Mad Lions will have a bounce back from this past weekend and their performance that they had. And when you're looking at Schalke, I expect it to continue the form that they have shown and the way that they've played and drafted. This is going to be great. This is going to be a really tight match series. This one's going to full distance. This one's going to 5. And I got the Schalke boys pulling off the dream. They're pulling it off, and they're making a trip to Worlds.
Mark believes in the miracle run, and really this matchup, based on what we saw against Fnatic, I wish Rogue hadn't qualified. I don't want one of these teams to be eliminated. I want Rogue to have to prove themselves more, at least win a best of series, or honestly, I'll even lower the standard, be competitive in a playoff series against some of the other teams in the LEC. Maybe they'll do that in the next round, but it's a tragedy that one of these teams is going to be eliminated so quickly. It's very difficult to pick. I feel like they both deserve to be at Worlds. The turnaround that Schalke has shown has been absolutely incredible. They've beat everyone who's good in the LEC during this run, and I don't see why it should stop right now. But Mad Lions, they were competitive against G2. I've wanted to see them at Worlds since we saw what they did in playoffs in the spring split. I gotta favor slightly that the Mad Lions will end the miracle run of Schalke here, which would be an absolute tragedy. But that one on the Rift is going to be absolutely fantastic. And then you go to the other Worlds berth on the line, TSM versus Cloud9. Usually it's the finals. We're talking about these guys. It's been not quite the same the last couple of years, but we said it before. This is more important than a finals, especially the summer split where you're already qualified at that point. This is, you're going to the World Championship or your season's done. You're going to be playing for another 2 months or you're done for the summer. That's insane.
And it's also insane because of what is riding on it for both teams, both squads. For Cloud9, this would be such an unbelievable disappointment of a summer split. To have the record that you did, the performance, the domination that you had all the way through spring, and for 9 games of summer split, pretty much half of the summer split at least, and you don't get to represent yourself or represent the region internationally would be a major misstep. And then on the TSM side, another way to the year on Bjergsen would be a bad thing in the first place. But to add it all in, you went big time, full cash out on the double lift addition to your team. Back, run it back. Let's do it. We're gonna get it. And to see a team with double lift and Bjergsen not able to qualify for Worlds, man, this is going to be a spicy Saturday in North America.
Yeah, and listen, they matched up in Week 8. It was TSM getting the better of Cloud9. That was when they were looking a little bit suspect, and to be honest, Cloud9 is still a little bit suspect. TSM riding the full momentum from that Golden Guardians reverse sweep. Can they carry that momentum and actually take down Cloud9? I mean, a lot of the matchups, we kind of talked about it. Mid, heavily in favor of TSM based on how Bjergsen's playing. Bot, you got to give the edge to Sven and Vulcan in the bot side. The question marks that TSM has had. And the top side, you still got to give the edge to Licorice, but it's not the same that it's been before. And big edge to the jungle for Blabber.
Yeah, I think even on that big edge for Blabber, you'd be looking at the inconsistency that Blabber has had during this time that Cloud9 has struggled. And maybe, that inconsistency is just partly on him and partly on the rest of the team's performance, what you've been seeing. But I think from what we've seen from Spica so far in this run and how he's performed individually, I think he's entering it as well as you really could have into this type of matchup against someone like Blabber with the MVP trophy that he does have. You said Licorice, and that's the one that I really want to talk about, because when you look in that top side and what Broken Blade did last week and how he rebounded and brought out those performances that we've talked about, when Broken Blade is playing at this level for TSM, it's a totally different story for the team. And if he brings that into the matchup against Licorice, and Licorice brings a form and, questionable consistency that we have seen from him over this stretch of night, then, man, it's going to be a really tough fought series, and we're going to see some advantages definitely go in the side of TSM.
Yeah, and it's a really difficult one to pick. I'm going to slightly favor edge over to TSM, but again, this is a very close series, almost a coin flip. Cloud9 probably should be favored, but I'm going slight upset for TSM. G2 versus Fnatic, I think most people are probably going to favor G2 based on history, the form at the end of the regular season. Fnatic, yeah, they look great against Rogue, but G2 really seems to be finding their form. All that being said, it seems the perfect time for Fnatic to finally take down G2.
I'm with 99% confidence that this will not be a 3-0. I can tell you that. This
3-0 coming.
I know. Usually when you look at a G2 Fnatic series, and as soon as you say that, yeah, incoming 3-0. But when I'm looking at this and the way that they're playing, I'm hard-pressed to think that there won't be a way that Fnatic and what they brought out last week and the preparation and play that they had, I can't see them not finding ways to steal away some games. But at the exact same time, what we saw from G2, the form that they were playing, the way that Wonder is playing in that top side, that's what's going to give me some positive concern on the Fnatic side and how they're going to be able to try and answer that. Because I tell you what, G2 is absolutely going to be ready to perform themselves on that day. So this is going to be a really wild match.
The last time they played, remember what Wonder did to Bwipo in the finals. It was not pretty. He's solo killing him. Doesn't matter if it's Zach or Ornn. It was messy in the top lane. He looks in great form. I got to pick G2 to get back to the finals, but Fnatic, G2, they're both going to Worlds either way. So we're all winners. That is all the time today for League Unlocked Market. Eric here with you guys. We'll be back to recap more playoff action. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you guys and gals on the Flippity Flop.